we think or what we believe, we are moving into a larger one-world unity in which one language is not enough. We also have arts that are fighting for survival. We have that tremendously inconsistent situation in which we are paying $2.5 million for a Picasso sketch, and at the same time we are paying $4 million for a genuine Rubens. These things are absolutely irresponsible. The sketch and the Rubens are not even in the same classification, and yet we have put a new value on both, money. And the same thing is happening all over the country and all over the world. The auction galleries are completely swamped with people willing to spend fabulous sums for something they don't even understand. Now, why don't they understand it? Why don't we understand art in its best sense? Why don't we understand music in its best sense? Because it isn't taught. If you want any of these specialties, you have to go to a specialized institution which specializes in them, and you'll then be fortunate if you find one with sufficient idealism to make the period of study worthwhile. So we now have knowledge. We have knowledge in science. But every time we look at knowledge now, we are sort of told that this is the ultimate. This is the absolute fulfillment of all these dreams. If we get this space platform out, it is going to change the course of ages. The most thing it's probably going to do is to run us further short in essential commodities. There is no reason to believe that if we put this spaceship out there long enough, it's going to solve anything. Because we're not out there. We're here. And we're using up the precious resources of here so that we can spend a few weeks out there, which isn't particularly valuable. We have all kinds of projects that are built upon what we think now. Our idea of the conquest of space is that we're going to be able to colonize it or find a possible use for it in the form of a garbage pail out there. We are believing definitely that space is something we're going to exploit as we've exploited everything else. And yet all the way along, we do not really solve anything. We do not understand anything. We are born ignorant and we die ignorant. And in between, we learn to make a living, and a few learn to make a fortune. And when the whole thing is shaken down, where are we? The great values do not grow because we do not permit them to grow. We have no real reason to believe that we want to improve. We really only just want to stay the way we are and have more. We want to be a little wealthier, we'd like to be a little more famous, and we'd like a good solid contract with some studio for $1 million a year. The idea of really growing, of improving ourselves. The question, I talked to a young man not long ago. I said, why don't you try improving yourself? Well, he says, do you know anyone who's doing any better than I am? Why should I improve myself? Nobody else does. And this is what is happening to a world that has a public school system, has all kinds of advantages, and is staffed by individuals who are completely devoid of real understanding of what value constitutes. Where are the philosophers of the 20th century? Where will be the philosophers of the 21st century? Are they all going to do what they are doing now, keep their noses so close to the grindstone that they can't see anything beyond the mess they are creating now? This all ends in the problem that knowledge is not the end. Knowledge is not a real end of anything. It is simply becoming aware of the way things are being mishandled at the moment. It also has something to do with the idea that if we can make the same mistakes, we may be able to be as rich as the people we don't like. But this is going to be a little difficult. So we have now this wide world, arts, sciences, nations, academies, institutes, everything you can think of, all dedicated to some great program, and no great program. No actual realization. The only thing we have is a great mass movement against which a few thoughtful individuals have braced themselves in an effort to survive the common contagion. So we ought to have to remember that when science says it has a cure for something, it will have a different cure next year. When we buy something because it is best, then there was never one like it. Within 2 years, there will be one much better. All the way along, these things go. But when it comes to the values of life, is the American home any stronger than it was? Are our young people growing up clean? Are the various forms of business we're involved in, are they honorable? Is the average person building a character that he can live with for the rest of his life? Are we fair to the children or the aged? Or to the sick or the well? To the rich or the poor? Everything goes along carefully covering up the weaknesses of every phase of it. And under the general heading of knowledge, we place a limitation upon what we can think, what we can believe, and how we should interpret the facts of life. So now, here and there is a breaking through into another dimension. Knowledge is beginning to mean something that solves something, rather than simply perpetuates. We know that young people are going to school. Knowledge now is how to get sufficient insights to get a good job. Also, while this is happening, the moral structure of youth is collapsing. And with this falls also most of the older generation. We do not recognize that by living on the surface of thinking, we are condemning ourselves to the errors and fallacies of surface living. We are not here to live on the surface of the mind. We are not here to live only on the pleasures of the mind, or the pleasures of the flesh, or the pleasures of the heart, or the pleasures of luxury. We are here as individuals to improve, to grow, to think, and to understand life. We are also here, if possible, to see that we can pass on to another generation a world a little better for our having been here, rather than a world falling apart because of our mistaken understanding. Now, on the opposite side of this is wisdom. Now, how shall we define wisdom? Wisdom is no longer a surface. Wisdom is now an interpretation of value. Every bit of so-called knowledge is capable of being examined by wisdom. There is nothing that we do, nothing that we have, nothing that we hope that does not in some way tie into the concept of wisdom. And wisdom can be suggested as meaning. It is the something that amounts to something. It is something that makes an experience more important than 30 days in jail. It is something that makes it more important to stay sober than to try to get sober. Wisdom begins to use the ideas that we find in knowledge and ensoul them, give character to them, give meaning to them, and bestow upon each one of them a dimension of growth. All growth has to be included. Knowledge has to grow. And the moment knowledge grows now, it becomes associated with fallacies because of inexperience. We are not able now to use knowledge in a dimension of growth. Actually, knowledge comes to us from the outside. The interpretation of knowledge comes to us from the inside. We are gradually learning that from the inside of ourselves, we have to explain the things that are happening in the outside world. Now, this isn't easy, because the things that are happening on the outside are inconsistent with most of the values that come from the internal life of the person. The thing that has made this matter endurable is the fact that the inside, the wisdom of the individual, has not been developed. Therefore, with the fallacies of the moment, there is no remarkable, intense rebellion from within him.